Hello and welcome to Re-enthused. Today we are going to be, well, you remember we've talked about the RX78 quite a lot, especially for a channel which has claimed several times not to do computers. But one of the things we picked up on was the joysticks, or lack thereof. We have no joysticks for this. It has a slightly unique pinout, which we, in a previous video, we found out what the pinout was. Now, the idea we had was to be able to make a adapter so we could use just a bog standard controller from another console. And that's still very much a viable option. But I'm thinking, okay, how about instead we just build our own joystick? Joysticks are a fairly simple device when you go back to these times anyway, when it was just very simple switches and electrical circuits being joined up. So I've got a 3D printer downstairs, although you can do this without a 3D printer. You can buy things like project boxes and stuff to house it. So why not just build one? We can make it look a little bit like the original one this came with, but I think we'll probably make a few changes on the way just to make it easier to print so that it can be reproduced easily. Right. So joysticks. Let's go through just some of the idea about how joysticks work. So it's a fairly simple topic. So in this first video, this is going to be an irregular series. It's not going to be every week, but we'll break it down because not everyone's going to want to watch this anyway. And it is quite a large topic once we get past the basics of it and the actual manufacturing and designing the casing and stuff. So, a joystick. Now, a joystick has two basic component parts. It's got the actual control stick for directions, and it's got action buttons for the fire buttons, etc. In our case, it's got one button. This RX78, as far as I'm aware, and from what I found out, only uses one button. It could be the two games I've got just happen to not use two buttons. I'm hoping not. We'll find out later. It doesn't matter either way. So first of all, we're just having one button. So that's simple. Now, the joystick is by far the most complicated part of this, because obviously it isn't just a on-off system like the fire button is. The fire button is either being pushed or it's not being pushed. Technically the joystick's that as well, but it has to also cope obviously for the four ordinal directions, so up, left, down or right. And it also has to cope with variations of those. So up, left, up, right, down, etc, etc, etc. So the joystick has to be able to activate the switches depending on the direction you want to go, but also have the ability to access adjoining switches if you're pushing two directions at once. So that's fairly, it's not too hard, but it's just, this has a few design considerations. Now, there are basically two main ways of making the joystick work. You've got either this way, which is a kind of pivoting system. So the joystick's pivoting in the center, usually with some kind of ball mechanism, and it uses the stem at the bottom to activate the switches. Now, as you can see, if we push right, it's actually activating a switch on the left. So you have to remember that. There's some benefits of doing this. It means that recentering it doesn't require as much force because the pivot point is much closer to the top of the joystick. But it's also, it's relatively complex. So the other way is we just have direct input. So the pivot point on this one is right at the bottom, and the joystick itself just basically pushes into the switches to activate them. There's a few downsides to this. It's a lot harder work to get the thing centered. It requires you to really set up the joystick buttons much more finely than the other method, because it's got the troubles with right. In fact, using this picture, you'll see that the switch on the right is a little further out than the switch on the left, and this is to illustrate a point. So it's basically the travel distance. Now, travel distance is something you probably know from a keyboard, where the keys, how far they travel down before they access. That's basically how, it's one of the reasons for whether a keyboard's easy to type on or not, and also how it feels. In terms of joysticks, we want that travel distance to be as small as possible. The reason being, we want to be able to move fairly quickly. So if we hit left, we want to be able to go left really quickly rather than having to push a long way left before it activates. It's a fine point because we don't want to be too sensitive, because then you could just be accidentally activating different directions just by accidentally touching the joystick. So that's one of the things we have to work out, but that's trial and error. In fact, it's a similar point for the buttons as well, which I'll go over in a second. Now we're probably going to go with the second kind of joystick, the direct action one, just because it's much easier to make. And to help with the recentering, we've got the basic mechanical switch's ability to deflect the joystick, which isn't a lot of force, but it's some. But also we're going to stick a nice spring on the bottom there, and that spring will be pivoted on the floor, and so it will try to recenter itself back to its original shape, which should take the joystick with it. Otherwise, we're going to end up like the Atari 5200 joystick, which was horrible, didn't center, and was just useless to use. We don't want that. So, that's the joystick. The buttons are much simpler. You see here the buttons. Literally all we've got is a button shape, which is actually rectangle in this case, because I'm going to use the similar shape to the original joysticks. And it's got a little spike coming off of it, which is what's going to be pushing the actual button in. And you'll see there's a spring, and that spring can't fit through the small gap that the two walls have caused, and so that will basically push up against that, and the button the spike is able to go through to hit the button, but the spring won't go through, and therefore will act as the force to push back, with a little bit of mechanical force from the button as well. That's fairly simple. Yeah, again, travel time is an important thing. We don't want the button to have to take too long to hit the actual switch on the other side. But again, we don't want it to be so finely positioned that just tapping the button is going to cause it to activate. Again, trial and error. So, that's that. The next step will be for us to start actually designing this. So, we could try to work out what the dimensions of the original joystick were, but I think instead I'm going to tailor it for myself. So I'm going to basically calculate what would be, I feel, a comfortable size for me to hold in my hand, and then make the box based on that. Again, if you don't have access to 3D printers and stuff, and there are quite a few online places you can print stuff out. Oh, the designs and all that gubbins will be available, obviously, for download after this on the Re-enthused website. But anyway, we'll design it around my hand because I'm making it, therefore I want it to be good for me. And we'll try to work out the electronics we need. Now, switches, I've got a load of those, but I'll also show which kind of ones to buy. I'm going for really nice clicky ones, just because I really like nice clicky joysticks, so that's why I'm going for that. There are tons of different buttons you could be using. And the things like springs and stuff, well, that's going to be more of a crapshoot. I've just basically ordered a big box of springs from eBay, and I'm hoping that I'm going to get 3 of them that will be useful for us. So the one for the joystick and 2 for the buttons. There are 2 buttons, one either side. At the moment, they're going to be doing the same job because, like I said, I think this only uses 1 button. But we'll have 2 in there with their own switches just in case, so that we can break it off and make a second button if need be. Yeah, so next time we'll actually go through doing some design work for this. We'll do some work out what the measurements are going to be, and we'll open up a 3D design package and just start mocking up some basic shapes. Right? Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please hit like. If you really enjoyed the video, please hit subscribe. If you didn't enjoy the video or you've got some comments to make, then please leave them below. Don't forget to hit the bell icon if you want to be told about future videos, including obviously the follow-up video to this one, which will happen sometime in the next couple of weeks, I would imagine. Yeah, see you next time.